in the country. I'll do a brief background, get into definition of concepts and methodology, and focus mainly on the findings and the key takeaways from this report. I would want us to leave here clear in our minds what the takeaway messages are. So I'm going to share with you the takeaway messages, and if there is a need to interrogate it through the presentation and to the end of it, we are happy to talk through it. So the first key takeaway message is that this report is looking at 10 different items. I'm going to share with you why we selected these 10 different items. So the first takeaway message is, if you put all these 10 items together, Greater Accra region in April 2023 recorded the highest prices. Please, here we are talking about prices. Here we are not talking about inflation. Here we are not talking about 307 items. Here we are talking about 10 items. So if you put all the 10 items together, which later I'm going to show to you, you'll find out that given the ranking of Greater Accra region for the 10 selected items in April 2023, Greater Accra region recorded the highest prices. The main focus of this report is to look at variations across regions and variations within regions. And the main highlight that we see here is that there are a lot more within region variations than across region variations. For emphasis, if you take each of our 16 administrative regions from the perspective of the 10 selected items, a lot of price variation relative to 56.3% for non-food inflation. So definitely, this is something that cannot be underestimated. In recent times, this has been more compelling because in our 2017-2018 Ghana Living Standard Survey, we realized that the share of food expenditure to total expenditure was 42.9%, which greatly contributed to inflation having a share of 43.7% in the computation of our food inflation. Just to tell you the statistics that we've produced over the period, in 2020, we did a comprehensive food security and vulnerability assessment survey, which is led by the World Food Program. And nationally, we captured a national food insecurity figure of 12.5%. Our emphasis here is the regional disparities. While we saw regions like Greater Accra recording 4%, regions like the Upper East region and the Upper West region and Northeast region recorded figures in excess of 20%. More striking was what happened in the Northeast region, which recorded close to about 50% of the people who are food insecure. On the other side, if you take another measure of food insecurity, which is the kilogram level or the per liter level for purposes of standardization. When we are doing the CPI and inflation, we do not do this because that we take into consideration the quantities. And because you are doing this over time, whatever quantity that you are using for the price, you standardize it over time. But for purposes of this work, we are looking at only prices, so there was the need to standardize the prices, for which reason we did the standardization per kilogram or per liter of the 10 items that we've analyzed in this report. The measure of inequality within region and across regions was done using the Tiley Index, and the only reason why we didn't use any other inequality measure other than this is that it is the inequality measure that allows us to capture the contribution of within region inequality and compare that with between region inequality, which was one of the main objectives of this assignment. We follow the same data that we collect, as was indicated. We go into 57 markets every month. In these 57 markets, we have identified 8,337 outlets, and this cuts across the 16 administrative regions. For purposes of this work, we're guided by some inclusion criteria. We only included items based on the biasness if you are using a measure of central tendency. So we said that if an item is less than 5, don't include it. For an item to be included, at least make sure you have 5 points for 5 price points for that item, just for purposes of comparability instead of having one price swaying a national assignment. And then secondly, we thought that for this to be nationally representative, those items that you've identified to have a minimum of price points, make sure that you can find them in a minimum of 10 administrative regions. And obviously, in the selection of the items, we're guided by items that are consumed by both sides of the wealth divide, that is the rich and the poor. So we considered issues of staple items and also items that will be considered by the relatively well-off. And this was guided by the weights that we put on the items. So the 10 items that we've used for this report are beef, bread, cassava, cooking oil, imported price, milk, millet, plantain, tomato paste, and yam. As I indicated earlier on, there is scope for collaboration. There's scope for us to increase this once we have this collaboration with those of us in the academic community to have a more representative selection of the items based on the current 307 items that goes into the computation of CPI and rate of inflation. So colleagues, I turn on to the findings. So the first issue that we want to draw attention to is across these 10 items, what is the price variations across the 10 administrative regions? So we start with imported rice. And if you take imported rice, we have Ahafo region recording the highest median price of 20 Ghana cedis, and Upper West region recorded the lowest price of 10.7. So between these two regions, that is Ahafo region and Upper West region, it's about twice the prices of imported items. The situation, that is the variation for these items, varies across the 10 different items. So now we focus on beef as an example. So beef, you have a per kilogram price in the central region of 62 Ghana cedis, and in the upper east northern region, you are recording prices close to 20 Ghana cedis, respectively 23.3 in the northern region and 20.0 in the upper east region, suggesting about more than 3 times change between the per kilogram price of beef in central region relative to the upper east region. Indeed, we identified 2 other regions that recorded rates in the region of 60 Ghana cedis, specifically the Bunu East region and the Ashanti region. Now we turn to the 10 items, and we look at the 10 items, and what we want to communicate here is, across the 10 items, which regions rank the highest in terms of the median prices. And we identified 2 regions that, for the 10 selected items, in 3 instances, they recorded the highest median prices. The first that we see is what we are seeing in the Western North region. We see the Western North region recording the highest price for tomato paste, recording the highest price for yam. And another region that we see recording the highest 3 times is the Ahafo region, and the Ahafo region records the highest median price for the 10 selected items 3 times, specifically for items like bread and millet and imported rice for the Ahafo region. Other regions that for the 10 items they appeared once included regions such as the Upper East region. So if you go to the Upper East region, it recorded the highest median price for cassava. If you go to the Central region, it recorded the highest price for beef. This is contributing to the main take-home message that the variations are commodity specific. So the variations do not cut across. You don't say for all items, it is this region that is driving for all the regions. And this is exactly what we are communicating here. We turn to the 10 items, and again, it's the same numbers that we're turning around to tell the picture as in why we say that Greater Accra, if you put the 10 items together, they have the highest prices. So if you put if you put the 10 items together, Greater Accra is ranked in the top 3 6 times. We have 10 items that we are looking at in this report. If you put all these 10 items together, and if you look at the regional rankings for the 16 administrative regions, you identify Greater Accra region coming in the top 3 6 times, giving its average ranking across the food items 3.7. And again, this is justifying the argument that putting all 10 items together for the month of April 2023, Greater Accra was the most expensive as it had the highest prices. We had to make an exception for it because it reflected 5 of the regions of the 16. So this is an exception but we couldn't have gone ahead to make an exception